Phil, I have something super top secret that I want to stay top secret.
Oh,
and before I tell you, I want to make sure that I apprise roughly 25 people about this top secret information, all of whom will be very, very surprised by this top secret information. And I'm sure that none of the top secret information that I do not want to leak will leak. That's the plan I'm going with, Phil. Do you think I am going to keep this information secret?
Well, how long are you waiting before you send the information to these 25 people and then get it out to the rest of the world?
Like almost immediately, unless something changes and something has to go on hold. In that case, I'm just gonna assume that telling like 25 people is not going to result in literally any delay. Even, let's say, a minute delay is going to result in the information getting out before I am able to put the information out.
Okay. That seems like a solid plan.
Yeah, of course, I'm referring to the completely manufactured non-controversy of why didn't Austin FC apprise all of the players before the announcement of the dual firing of a sporting director and a coach, which Brad Stuver said they were on a day off, and that's why it would have been weird to call everybody in for a meeting if they were trying to keep the information secret. And
that wouldn't have tipped anything off. It wouldn't have tipped
anything off. It wouldn't look suspicious at all after one of the more brutal losses in club history. What could the meeting possibly be about, Phil?
Who knows?
Ice cream sundaes for everybody. That's what the secret was.
It's our half-season asada. Got to plan that.
Yeah, just a random Monday barbecue when you otherwise have a day off.
Mm-hmm.
Mandatory, but just nothing important.
A mandatory asada. Asada's usually mandatory, right?
I mean, it is to me. It is in my household.
Yeah, absolutely.
Emergency podcast. They did a thing, so we gotta talk about it. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency. Emergency podcast. Shut up, oh yeah, shut up, oh yeah, shut up. Emergency podcast. It's an emergency.
Hey, hearty hello to you all, and welcome to Emergency Podcast, the Austin FC podcast. We talk about all the Austin FC emergencies, like we are recording at 7 a.m. on Saturday, and we're trying to get this up before a 1:45 p.m. match on Saturday. Not just any match, Moisés, not just any match. The last match before a 2-month World Cup pause, which may or may not include a preseason with a new head coach, which we have been speculating about. How are you? How has this week been for you? This has been one of the more, shall we say, eventful weeks in Austin FC history.
I would say one of the more eventful weeks in Austin FC history. And it's not just a notable thing for Austin FC. This is an uncommon thing to happen across the league. You hear the soccer wise guys going, can you remember a time that something like this has happened? And this, to me, it's why on the last episode I said this is bold decision-making, whether you are skeptical of it or not, whether you believe the completely sourced and above board things that you and I and other people have said about this overall situation or not. This is a statement from ownership. This is a statement from the people running the club that they are serious about making the hard decisions and big moves when they have to be made. And they're not afraid to do that.
Right. I mean, there are other clubs that are currently making big moves, which we're going to get into momentarily here. But yeah, for Austin right now, it is a quest, of course, obviously, to get both a sporting director and a head coach. We don't know in what order necessarily. We assume the sporting director first, but we also assume maybe there's a package deal that is in place. And of course, they do have the matter of this game that they have to play this afternoon with Davy Arnaud, who is a perfect 1-0-0 as an interim coach for Austin FC, and he will be facing a team that has, interestingly enough, as we learned from Justin Horniker this morning, you'll be able to see the 3 questions that he did. We exchanged questions. I have some answers for him as well, but he says that St. Louis has faced an interim coach 3 times prior and lost all 3 of those matches.
Well, let's keep the record perfect, Phil.
Yeah, the trend lines are boding well for this match. Certainly going to be a weird one. Don't know that there's going to be, like I told him, a new coach bounce necessarily from this one, but a new sporting director bounce, perhaps.
I think that the big thing at play here, and this is something that I don't remember which one of the Soccer Wise guys said this, but it'll be notable to see how these guys play, how they communicate, how they link up, and if there is a weight lifted, much more so for the sporting director change than the coach change, for the myriad reasons regarding mixed signals and not being clear on who is in charge. One of the things, this is entirely speculation and just a read and vibes. In Jorge Alastawe's first team minutes, he missed a sitter. And the look on his face, for me, was a player who, it's not that he wasn't the quality. It wasn't that he didn't have the mentality for it. It's that the environment that he was in was an environment run on fear. The hesitation that I saw in that player is not something that I've seen anytime he's played for the second team.
Interesting.
And that's not something that I think he learned at La Masia, was that kind of hesitation. I think that exactly the kind of thing that contributes to something like that being a different kind of pressure, or something where you've got something in the back of your head that makes you question something you don't normally question, is when you get last minute words of encouragement from an overbearing sporting director who thinks that there is a version of motivation that is driven on don't screw this up, with harsher words being used.
So this is not just the largeness of the MLS moment in your mind?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
And I use that as an example because I've seen that in other cases where, from seeing and knowing and having related to us directly the way that Nico talks to players, and hearing secondhand the way that Rodo would talk to players, I think that there is something about player mentality that was one of the bigger issues with Rodo being in the mix, and was yet another thing that Nico had to contend with in terms of pushing that boulder uphill.
Right.
Where that is informed based on certain things that have been said to me on background. One of the other things that I would say to edify people who may have doubted some of the stuff that I said in the last episode, it's really interesting that every single time on the record, me or somebody else in the press corps asked any player about what it was like working with Rodo, they got off the subject as quick as humanly possible. Rodo's great. Yeah, we're just out here. We're trying to do our best. And compare that to the way that they talked about their coach, where they would actually engage with press and talk to us about what it was like working with Nico as a manager. They just said absolutely nothing to us about Rodo.
Yeah. You know what that actually reminds me of? I'm going to take you back. You remember after the Uzuni miss, I think it might have been the playoff match miss, where Nico said, I don't know what is happening, why he missed that. He doesn't miss those in practice.
Nico said that about Myrto. Okay.
Yeah. Nico said that about Myrto. So I wonder, again, similarly with Alastawe that you're talking about there, was that thing that was troubling him a certain gruff, overbearing sporting director?
Let me remind you how much money I spent to get you here. Let me remind you how much money you make. Let me remind you how bad you're making me look. Let me remind you. Let me remind you.
Just a theory to posit. You know.
Let me remind you, or phrasing along those lines being repeated to me multiple times about sometimes from his own mouth, in terms of the way that he dealt with not just players, but other members of the staff, people within the community. There was a theme that was just common in all of his communication with everyone. So it's, to an extent, speculation, but very much founded in 3 years of watching this guy operate.
Yeah. Interesting.
So the majority of this episode, we're going to be digging into this coach and sporting director speculation article that we did. And I figured I should preface it briefly in the way that we have previously when we talk about sourcing, when we talk about things that we hear. I know the people that follow Austin FC have had various different experiences with, well, little birdie told me, well, I heard this. Well, a certain player just ran their mouth about all kinds of locker room stuff that his own teammates are probably not thrilled. Not some of them, not necessarily every single one of them. When we talk about coming from a position of informed speculation, we're not coming at this from going, this would be good, this would be interesting. And in terms of protecting our sources, protecting how we characterize why we feel confident that this is, for example, the MLS-centric direction that they're looking in terms of both sporting direction and coach. That's what we're doing, is we are protecting those sources so that they continue to be sources of information and also so that they don't face any forms of reprisal. At the same time, we don't want to be pushing information out there that we think is unreliable, because what does that help anybody? Exactly. It doesn't help a positive process going forward for Austin finding a coach and sporting director that will surprise and delight fans. And I'll put it this way, Phil, when this team is not doing well, is it great business for subscriptions to Verde all day?
Well, if a coach and a sporting director get fired, then yes. But
okay.
normally no. Not as fun to write, not as fun to read.
I just wanted to preface this with that this is where we're coming from. It's not that we're just playing, well, this is what we would like to see, or as other former members of the press corps were very fond of doing, literally just making stuff up to come off like an insider with insider knowledge. The third kit that a member of the press corps, I'm going to air quote to not confuse that with our fine colleagues that we like and respect. I mentioned the third kit that I was planning on writing something up, but we got tied up doing this coach and sporting director thing. If you watched the show Billions on Showtime, Paramount Plus, whatever, there was this character who would be asked by his boss, what is your level of certainty? I am not uncertain. The third kit, I know exactly what it looks like, and I do not have contraband images to provide, but that is a case of the mock-up that we'll put out there, unless Footy Headlines beats us to the chase.
You have described it, though. I have it in my mind's eye.
Yeah, you have it in your mind's eye, and it is very easy to describe.
And it is...
Mystery.
Yeah.
With a...
Mystery.
And...
Mystery.
Across the front.
Yeah. And I think that I'll get into it more next week when we're on the other side of all this stuff. But with the coach and sporting director informed speculation, it's a different kind of, this is what it seems like they are prioritizing. These are names that are definitely in contention, and we're not going to point to exactly what they are. But I think we wrote this in a way that leads people in the direction of what we think is most likely, and why there are a couple of ringers that we threw in that I don't think either of us think are actually likely at all.
But could be possible.
But
we do
in terms of the shape they're looking at.
We do know in our coach and sporting director list that there is one that for each of those, at least one for each of those, that the club is seriously considering right now, based on sources.
So let's jump in on the article, Phil. Let's start with sporting director and how our lead chunk here, history itself, happened in the hours following this article posting, along the lines of what we thought was very possible, and that's that Tim Bezbatchenko has returned with a hero's welcome to the Columbus Crew.
Yes, he has.
And
so
we kind of had a feeling that was maybe in the offing, but there's a reason that we packaged him in with the combination of Corey Ray and Jamie McMillan.
Yeah. And as matters developed, we got the article up at 8:45 in the morning. So started it the night before, passed it between ourselves, finessed it, got almost 3,000 words. And then 90 minutes later, at 10:15, the Crew announces that Bezbatchenko is now the sporting director. And part of course, what we predicated that on is to have a package deal with Nancy. So do not be surprised if Wilfred Nancy returns to Columbus. But in true Dumb and Dumber, so you're telling me there's a chance meme, the possibility of Ray McMillan being a package deal and coming to Austin and Nancy being the coach with that is something that is theoretically still on the table. But it does seem that, again, if Bezpachenko now with the crew entices Nancy to come back, not a terribly surprising development that would be. But Nancy coming to Austin, the dream is still alive until it is dead.
Yeah, the indications that we've gotten about Austin wanting proven results, proven calm under pressure, finding the right fit. We recall when Roto was hired, Josh Wolf did not do any of the theoretical media training he's gotten any favors by making it blatantly obvious that he had no idea that that was going to be the sporting director hire. He did not read as terribly happy about it, to the extent of it coming off like he wanted them to go in a different direction and they didn't listen to him, and he was not hiding how unhappy he was about it. It seems that the interest is in a harmonious pairing of sorts. Right. And I think that having proven results and a proven pairing or grouping of staff, that's what makes Wilfred Nancy possible. Is it likely? I wouldn't say that it's as likely as some of the other possible situations we're looking at.
Now, maybe not even then.
Not even then. Yeah, even before the Bezpachenko thing, I think we were rating this as, it sure seems like that is the shape of something that Austin would be going for, but Columbus is starting an NWSL franchise. They're staffing up for 2 teams, not just one. And so even if we're looking at Corey Ray looking for something more enticing than St. Louis, and his wife, Jamie, not being able to take a front office job at another team than St. Louis because of conflict of interest, just because
plus they are husband and wife, and that sets them up for a long distance relationship.
I think it's more, I don't know how well you'd be able to handle conflict of interest when you're dealing with day-to-day, highly confidential, highly advanced personnel decisions and that sorts of thing. And they are both incredibly good at what they do. And so I could see them landing back at Columbus alongside, in addition to Bezpachenko, but I would be surprised if Austin was not angling for some version of that. In addition to taking home 3 points this weekend, maybe they take Corey Ray back.
If you win, you get to keep your sporting director. If you lose, come on down. We're gonna set you up. We're gonna set you up in the Fairmount while you find a place to live somewhere in wherever the coaches and sporting directors live, which I think is kind of vaguely up north.
Yeah. So let's move on to the name that Soccer-Wise keyed on almost really immediately as the news is breaking when they were on live. And in addition to what we put in the article, why we're so high on this as, I mean, how more perfect of a connector could you go with than the multi-year winning MLS Executive of the Year, Garth Lagerwey?
Yeah. He'd be an excellent pick. Built something special at RSL, built something special at Seattle, went over to Atlanta, kind of mixed results there, but still highly respected, still 53. The one thing with him is that he did take a leave and ultimately left the club altogether because he had a battle with cancer. And he is, from reports, on the other side of that. But still, when you go through something like that, which is huge, and then you wonder, okay, what is it that I want to do with the rest of my life, in addition to, again, just kind of the continuing health concerns that brings up. Is it reviving Austin? Is that something that is desirable enough? Is that something that is in his blood where he would want to do that? And that is the big question here. But if he does, a lot of these choices are predicated on Austin is a very attractive place to go. It's a great city. It's great facilities. The stadium is amazing. The fans are amazing. The training facility is amazing. Again, it's not quite the destination that an LA or Miami is, but it's a really good landing spot.
Depending on who you are.
True. But just saying in terms of places that you could go in MLS, Austin is, I would say, in the top tier. It's not the sexy destination city that some of those other ones are, but certainly it ticks a lot of boxes for somebody who would want to come and build something. And again, like the cupboard is not bare, right? So there are good players here. They probably are a visionary coach and a few players away from being something at least solidly in the playoffs, at least something that is, say, maybe like a Minnesota level, or maybe again, maybe like Cincinnati level, if not straight up an LAFC or a Miami or a team like Seattle that is perennially in the playoffs.
The issue that I take with maybe not as ideal of a place as LAFC or Miami or New York City is that it depends on what you're looking for and looking to do. And Garth Lagerwey, to me, sees Austin as a project in need of someone to steer it for the future and chart the course and put the crew in place to fly off into the final frontier. To me,
right. The Austin crew, not the Columbus crew.
Yeah, Austin is categorically a more attractive project than the cheat code that is LAFC, the cheat code that is Miami's rosters, where it's not to say that there isn't a challenge in either place. Mm-hmm. It's that do you want somewhere to go where you know that you're going to have the backing of ownership to actually meaningfully make something happen, something that you can actually feel good and take credit for having built, having improved down the line, where Miami is crazy town at this point. Like, would you want to take that head coaching job? Like, how good of a friend of Leo Messi's are you? How good of a friend of David Beckham's are you? You might be coaching the Portland Timbers in a year.
Didn't know Phil Neville was going to catch a stray.
Well, he's always going to catch a stray if I'm on the mic. For me, the thing that makes this feel like so much more natural of a fit than other teams that might be looking for someone with the expertise that Garth Lagerwey has is this is like, we could write a whole other article about what we would do with the roster, and it would be 7,000 words long. We could go in so many different directions about all of the different stuff to do with the roster.
Is that a summer project?
Not for me. Best of luck to you, Phil. I wish you well.
I accept the challenge.
But for me, the way that this roster is interesting is you've got a bunch of guys on long-term deals that makes them more attractively dealable if they're in form and condition to be dealt. And also, if the majority of this roster stays the same by the other side of the summer break, I think this is a much more workable roster from underneath the yoke of Roto than it was under him. And I think it would be fascinating to see what a two-time MLS Executive of the Year, who is very well practiced in putting out fires, preventing fires from igniting, and just otherwise keeping heads cool under pressure and focusing on the long term. That to me is why the press release language that I hone in on that I think is worth looking at is them alluding to what they want in a sporting director as being someone who is setting up the future, not setting themselves up to immediately be obsolete, but to plan their own obsolescence and have something that they put in place that can outlive their tenure at the club with an eye on, look, as long as you want to be here, you're here. This ownership wants that kind of stability. They just haven't honed in on just the right match. And it feels like that's what they're selling Garth Lagerwey in theory.
Right. And somebody who's done it before. And again, you look at what they've had. You've had Claudio Reyna, who's done it before, but obviously the baggage that led to his dismissal. And then you had Roto, who'd never done it before, who, again, was sold them on the idea of, I have this expertise honed from years and years in Europe. I have been at the side of Pep Guardiola and all of that. But yeah, I think Lagerwey, to me, ticks a lot of the boxes that Austin seems to be hinting at. To me, again, if he wants the job, I think it's his. And the other thing, too, is that, again, he is coming from Atlanta, where Arthur Blank definitely willing to spend. Precourt is willing to spend, maybe not to the level that Blank did, because Blank is on kind of a whole different strata of billionaire, but also maybe you don't need to spend the money that Atlanta's spending, because again, they're spending a lot on players that are not necessarily fulfilling the promise of mega payouts. Latte Latham, I'm looking at you.
There's something to be said about working within constraints and thriving with not having a completely blank check, having an ownership that is willing to spend, is willing and motivated to spend if it translates to winning form. But I think that some constraints are not the worst thing. The roster prior to Borrell, he needed to come in and fix a bunch of stuff that was way busted and had been busted from when Claudio took the job originally.
Mm-hmm.
And he did that, which some who said he was the worst CSO in MLS would say. I wouldn't go so far as to say anybody could do what Rodo did with the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever was taking the job, ownership had to be confident was going to be able to do what Rodo ended up doing with the roster. So fair play to ownership. They got a guy to get salaries closer to reasonable parity, but also who apparently did not understand what TAM was because he never used it, which I don't get.
Right,
I was waiting for the move that was going to somehow make that make sense.
Yeah. Don't forget also that we had that interim Sean Rubio period, which is maybe colored most by giving Toronto's Matt Hedges a hefty payday and then becoming Toronto's sporting director or high up in the Toronto chain shortly after that. That was interesting.
Yeah, very much not to the credit of how people in Austin should remember Sean Rubio, setting himself up with a nice soft landing at his next destination, seeing the writing was on the wall. For me, Garth Lagerwey represents a pathway to coaches who will go, oh yeah, I'll work for Garth. Garth Lagerwey? Yeah, I will work for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
That never would have taken a job under Rodo Borrell.
Right, yeah. We have some other candidates, though. The speculation that the Soccer-Wise guys threw this out, and this makes a certain kind of sense too, is take a really solid number two behind a good sporting director, for example, LAFC's Neil McGuinness or Nashville SC's Chance Myers, and that is certainly a possible direction to go. I still feel like Austin would lean more Lagerwey if he will take the job, just because I think at this point they want somebody who has done the job before, not somebody who has promise and is stepping into the job, but also if they are looking for longevity, if they are looking for culture, if they are looking for somebody who has come up and done it the right way, as it were, rather than just floating in from Europe and being confident in being able to do the job and then running up against a morass of MLS roster rules, then McGuinness or Myers are maybe possible directions that you could go. And then also we just kind of threw in, for air quotes, fun, Oscar Pareja. Again, if you want to go that dual kind of head coach, sporting director role, his name's been floated around as that. Again, I think that Pareja, certainly he's got a good track record as coach in MLS. He's got that relationship with Facundo Torres from their days at Orlando. That makes a certain kind of sense. But again, there is a MLS 1.0-ness to that all. It's not quite Peter Vermees, which again, we considered and then had a hearty chortle and decided that no, that would not be the direction that Austin should go. Despite the experience, right?
Yeah, these three who aren't some combination of crew people or Garth Lagerwey, between Neil McGuinness and Chance Myers, I would put them on a similar footing to each other. Between the two of them, if I had to pick, I would pick Neil McGuinness. Yeah, I think his head is better for it. I think he's got more of a hunger for it. Chance Myers, looking at it, Nashville is on a heater of all heaters. Why would he leave? And what would he get to do at Austin other than potentially screw up his first sporting director job and not necessarily cover himself in glory looking for an exposition rather than stay the course where he's at? I feel like Neil McGuinness, I like his expertise better. I like his experience overall better. I feel like he's got more of the profile of what Austin would be looking for when you're looking at guys like talented number twos that are out there. But yeah, same reasons as you mentioned for Oscar Pareja. The thing we didn't mention in the article that I was kind of thinking is maybe it's not actually an advantage for him that he's got the relationship he does with Facundo, because you don't want your new guy coming in and your other DPs and other guys on the roster thinking, well, there's favoritism already for this one guy. And the potential for that imbalancing things to an extent.
Right. Yeah. And there's also Drew from Big D Soccer jumped out and said, yeah, maybe you don't want to double dip and get another former FC Dallas coach. And it's like, yeah, I think a lot of our fan base is aware of that. Probably don't want to make that move. No shade on Nico. But again, that was one of the things when Nico came in is, oh, here's this coach, not only who was recently coaching an MLS team, but it happened to be our rival to the north. And that's, again, there is meaning to that rivalry. There is something to that. And that's going to be a little bit of baggage coming in. Not something that is a deal breaker, certainly, but if you want to endear yourself to the fans, that's not the way to do it necessarily.
Yeah, that's got to be part of their calculus too, is do we want to be known for, well, we're hiring former Dallas coaches, which you can only control so much about what the press and what the fan press and what MLS watchers say, and people will absolutely say that if they hire an Oscar Pareja.
Yeah. So shall we move on to coaches?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. We talked a little bit about Wilfried Nancy. What I like about him, if you've been paying attention the last few weeks, and Moisés, you have had these conversations with me more than most. So probably you're the one that I've talked about this the most in my life, much more so than, say, my wife, for example, not the biggest soccer fan. My big thing with him is that he's done it at two separate MLS places. He had a really good run with Montreal, and you see what Montreal has done since. And then obviously what he's done with Columbus. And again, getting a title there, getting trophies, certainly his track record is good. But I just also like that he has this kind of visionary approach, that he is something of a maverick, that he does take players, and I think what Nico tried to do, but on a whole other level, where he sees how the puzzle pieces fit together and makes really, really good cohesive wholes out of the parts. And again, I think that's something that Nico did try to do and experimented with, but as you saw over the course of a year and a half, it didn't necessarily quite work out in some instances, whereas I think Nancy has a better sense of that. And we've talked about having a truly functional 5-2-3 or 5-3-2 formation, and that's something that certainly we've seen from Nancy, and that's, I think, something that we could see this club doing. And this club is probably a solid center back away from being able to execute that fairly well. I mean, of course, a 10 would be nice. Who knows what's going to happen in the summer, but that is something that really, really intrigues me about him as a possibility.
Well, you brought up the dreaded, well, what Austin's missing is a 10 conversation. I'm sorry, but I'm not sold on the solution to any team's problem is a heliocentric 10. And I don't think that the roster build, just dropping in a DP 10, is going to suddenly improve things. And in fact, would end up resulting in needing to make things more reliant on that 10 than injuries being what they are, than is necessarily wise. I feel like the biggest advantage to Nancy is, like you said, he can do a lot with what he's got to work with, because that's literally what he did at two teams running. And what happened at Celtic is what happened at Celtic. The thing that I've seen a variety of people chirp about is there's no way they would go after Nancy. Respectfully disagree. For reasons we laid out in the article and the ambition and indications we have of what it is that they're looking for, as well as what I think Wilfried Nancy should be looking for in terms of redefining the fact that no, he is not the guy who is the way that he was portrayed by that 8-match run at Celtic. Oh, he wants to stay in Europe. I'm sure he would love to. What job in Europe is he going to get offered on the back of what happened at Celtic?
Right.
Even if he were returning to Austin, to MLS, to Austin, to Columbus, if the harmonious fit is right in either place, even a little bit of time at either of those clubs makes the prospect of, if he really does want to just end up in Europe, it makes the market for him a lot more comfortable. In the same way that Uzuni performing and showing himself to be the player that I think he was on paper, that he was sold as, that he got that $12 million transfer fee for being in Segunda Liga. I think he is a coach who, if he wants to end up in Europe, he's got to reprove that the market should be there for him, that the level of clubs that I think one of the best coaches in world football is deserving, convince the people signing those checks to do that, is the way that I think it makes sense for Nancy to come back to MLS. And third time is yet another charm, whether he does it at Columbus, whether he does it at Austin. For me, it's kind of a coin flip as to whether Columbus is just too comfortable for him, especially with Bezbatchenko landing back there before that happened. You know, for me, it was more of a toss-up, but I think Bezbatchenko landing back at Columbus is more of an indication that it is more likely that the Haslams want to roll back out what worked before.
Sure. But also don't underestimate Anthony Precourt's desire to get over on Columbus. That is going to be a perpetually driving force in his life based on
I think so.
the experience that he had there.
And also just in terms of the ambition, I think anybody has doubt that Austin's front office would go for hiring Wilfried Nancy. I am not uncertain that you are wrong to think that.
Right. However, there is another interesting coaching choice that's out there, Jim Curtin, who obviously had nearly a decade of success at Philly. I've gotten the opportunity to interview him before. He's very thoughtful, very kind, similar to Nico, but also with kind of maybe more of an edge. Certainly, he's been able to take parts and make a better sum out of them based on his Union days. Really good working with youth, obviously. Philly having one of the better academies in the league at the outset when he took that job and continuing that. I mean, obviously you look at players like Kevon Sullivan and you see what they're able to do in terms of taking young talent and making them much, much, much better and ready not only for MLS, but leagues beyond in Europe. So I think that this would be a very, very sound hire if they could get him. He has been out of coaching for a few years. Certainly, I know from sources that Austin would not be the only team that is interested in him. But again, I would not be surprised if an offer is made and with the sporting director, we get the announcement of a coach, and that coach would be Curtin.
For me, it isn't to say that a Wilfried Nancy, Garth Lagerwey fit would be an ill fit, but a Jim Curtin, Garth Lagerwey pairing would be a more natural fit. And I feel, to your point about the longevity of time that he was at Philadelphia and very much about the whole tree of a club, let him do it for an actual tree club, roots to canopy. I think this is something that people think, like Nancy, is unlikely. Why would he come here? But didn't Tom Bogert say that he was not going to be able to do anything for family reasons through 2026? Like we put in the article, does that mean calendar 2026 or school year ending in the first half of 2026?
Right. Yeah.
That's what isn't specified in that. What we had heard was that family reasons in terms of why he wanted to stay on the East Coast. And then as he was being looked at very seriously for the Revs job, he then tapped out of that. So not even East Coast would do it.
Yeah, that job is not as attractive as it might be in a couple of years with the new stadium and just the current roster build. You're kind of stepping into a mess with that. That was around the time that they were looking to move on from Caleb Porter. So again, much, much more disarray than you've got now with Nico. You've got a team that is floundering in the bottom echelons of MLS currently, but it's not one that is feeling kind of what they felt in the waning days of the Caleb Porter era with the Revs. There's a much better mindset going in. You're inheriting a team, if you come into Austin midway through 2026, that has a good, strong, solid core and is coachable and does not have all their desire to play good soccer beaten out of them the way that maybe the Revs were at that stage.
When you're talking about the staffing rebuild that's got to happen after house being cleaned out under Roto, and necessarily you get rid of your coach and your sporting director, there's some rebuild that's going to absolutely have to happen.
Yeah.
When it comes to doing a purpose-built job of that, I feel like Dream Team is what Lagerwey Curtin has written all over it because they both are long-term thinking guys.
Mm-hmm.
Anansi might be looking at wanting to move on in a few years, regardless of where he lands.
Sure. Yeah.
If his ambitions really are in Europe, which I don't know that for certain. But Jim Curtin wants to stay in MLS. He wants to coach in MLS. He has the track record that he did at Philly that then got very promptly undone to spectacularly, shockingly, to me, foolhardy fashion in terms of the way that things have gone at Philly since.
Mm-hmm. If you look at Lagerwey and Curtin together, you look at RSL, you look at Seattle, you look at Philly during much of Curtin's time, you look at Atlanta, there is this kind of through line of culture and emphasis of culture in all of those places. And I know that's something that Precourt absolutely values, and that's what he's looking for the club to do. That's why you see LAFC invoked from time to time, even from the origins of the club, right? So when Austin FC was first coming online. So yeah, I do think Lagerwey, Curtin together makes a lot of sense. There are a few other coaching candidates that we've got on this list, though. Vanni Sartini, of course, which I would delight in, if nothing else, for the amazing press conferences that I'm sure would come. But also, he does come from a methodology background. So he is very much a kind of high-level soccer thinker, and I think that he would be an interesting addition. I know that you've got questions about, okay, does he want to come to the great state of Texas after being in Canada? Albeit right now he's in Halifax. That's not necessarily a hotbed of soccer per se, but at the same time, it's an enticing MLS job. I think that this would be enticing enough for him to at least consider. He is maybe a little bit of a loose cannon, right? So maybe there's a little bit of unpredictability to what he does and what he brings. Witnessing the antics of the playoff loss to LAFC a few years ago, kind of flashback to that, but he'd be an inspired choice, a wonderful choice. And again, since he would do things like have a media lunch and then walk them through the tactics of the coming year, I would very, very much enjoy the access that he would bring.
I would enjoy Vanni Sartini. I just do not see it happening whatsoever. Vanni Sartini is a hard left European socialist, and I just don't see that being a culture fit for, at least to now, the way that things have played out at this club.
Like you pointed out, though, the SGs would love him.
Yeah, the SGs would love him. The SGs aren't hiring the coach is the problem, which the SGs would tell you. Yeah, Vinny's he's a solid coach. He's a great culture guy. I just don't see that name being considered an ideal one. I think he is, it's something you just raised, a bit more of a loose cannon running on his own script. This ownership group wants a more by the books Boy Scout job.
Buttoned up. Yeah.
A bit more buttoned up than I think Vanni can do. I would love to see him here. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Another guy with solid MLS experience who is also in the article that I think would be a more likely fit is Gio Savarese. There are questions about why has he been out of coaching for so long? And some of that is the longer a coach is on the shelf, the harder it is to make them the kind of Jim Curtin, Wilfred Nancy, oh man, get me that guy. Get me this guy. He's hot right now. Every team in MLS has to be interested in the guys who are the hot dudes of the moment, but track record wise, he's solid. He's reliable. Yeah. He's reliable enough for MLS to have him on their broadcast talking about the league. He's disciplined when it comes to messaging and that sort of thing. I think in contrast with Vanni, a more likely fit for this front office.
Right. Also bilingual after Nico. That is an important thing. And that is something that's maybe a strike against Curtin, if anything. Certainly you can work around that. There are interpreters, there are assistant coaches, things like that can happen. But to have somebody step in and be able to have the same kind of linguistic fluidity that Nico had, I think would be a plus in his favor. And again, the stability, like you talked about. He was at the Cosmos for a little over 5 years. He was with the Timbers for 5.5 years. Obviously, he took them to 2 finals at that time. They didn't win either of them, but still somebody who can consistently have teams perform in MLS and somebody with the kind of experience that he's got, the kind of bearing that he's got would be good. And also Venezuelan, that's also a plus, right? So I'm sure that would be nice for Danny, right?
The thing for me is, I mentioned in the article, not the kind of splashy, the name you wouldn't believe that they could get. Right. But I think what they want is they want stability. They want calm, cool, collected. They want can be buttoned up as needed and have the right kind of fire to drive the discipline of the players. paired with the right sporting director, I don't see the fan base having a problem with Gio.
Right. Yeah, and then also the last one on our list, Gonzalo Pineda, obviously had some overlap with Lagerwey at Seattle. His stint in Atlanta and then at Atlas did not go that well. We talked about a Wolfian 1.32 points per game in Atlanta and a sub-Wolfian 0.92 points in 24 matches at Atlas. That's not so good, but has had a really good track record as an assistant coach with Seattle, and again, maybe just got some bad luck in there and maybe would be. I don't think he would move the needle like some of the other candidates we talked about, but certainly I think somebody that you would have to consider in this, just kind of based on his upbringing in soccer and also having been both in Liga MX and MLS. That's experience that I think is valuable, and I think would, especially again with Leagues Cup, that's not the end all be all, obviously, but doesn't hurt to have somebody with perspective from both leagues coming in to that particular competition. Theoretically, if you are trying to get both a sporting director and a coach in during the break, which I think it would behoove Austin to do, to be able to have that kind of mini preseason in June once the players come back, then you would hit the ground running with him theoretically, and Leagues Cup would be the first real test. The first real test would be coaching against his former team, Seattle, on July 22nd. But then you'd have Leagues Cup after that, and that might be just an interesting way to roll him out as a new coach. And I'd be much more thrilled if it was Nazi or Curtin or Sartini, but I think, maybe talk myself into Gonzalo Pineda.
The reason I didn't fight you on including this one is that even though I don't think he's likely at all for actual head coach, I could see a Minnesota-style situation of him being brought in as an assistant coach.
Sure. Yeah.
And lending the kind of expertise, exactly what you're talking about, having been on both the MLS and Liga MX sides of the curtain. I feel like there is something solid there. And it's something that if you got the right sporting director that is looking to build Austin for war, even though there are names that maybe they would not consider for head coach, but that have solid coaching pedigrees and that could use something of an opportunity to get their names back into the mix of being eligible for openings for a head coach at different clubs. This is a way back into that, is a solid assistant coaching tenure under a head coach at a team that is performing, honestly, the way that Minnesota is. If Austin can get to, they're playing roughly as well as Minnesota does, if not a little bit better, that's a great resume rebuilder.
So what we presented to you here is a load of speculation, but at the same time, some of this, like we said, is informed by things that we are learning by doing our work out in the field. And again, I do think this is going to be sooner rather than later. There's Excel, sports management, the search team that is ostensibly involved in the process, but my kind of read on it is that they already have candidates in mind that they're honing in, and Excel is probably more in the due diligence kind of category than the, hey, what about this list of candidates kind of role.
To make it clear, because again, not everybody, sources and rumors and all that kind of thing, people have different ways of processing things. None of the informed part of the informed speculation is being fed to us by the front office at all.
Right.
And they probably are not going to be thrilled that we know any of what we know. They will definitely know that we're not just making this stuff up because of how we know what we know. So,
and they also understand the job that we do.
There are things that we're holding back that we'll see how it plays out. ... But you know what we do know for certain, Phil?
Yeah, well, we know the SGs aren't going to be hiring a coach.
No, they're not going to be hiring a coach, but Los Verdes is throwing a watch party mere hours after we record this. One of our favorite things. And if you're worried about the rain, don't worry, because this Saturday's watch party at ABW Sprinkle Valley, not OG, Sprinkle Valley to be sure, has adapted due to damage to their outdoor canopy from severe rain. So everything will be all indoors.
Okay.
If you were a
so
Los
the
Verdes
canopy's
member,
damaged?
Yeah, the outdoor canopy is damaged, and so it's not safe. So everything's moved completely inside. And if you're a Los Verdes member, check in Slack. There are instructions for pulling up your digital membership card. And the reason I mention that is that Los Verdes members get a discount on your bar tab at ABW Tap Rooms.
Oh, nice.
So head on down to ABW Sprinkle Valley. Kickoff is 1:45. Everybody will be there by 1, a little bit before that. Go hang out, have a good time, and just enjoy the last opportunity for a watch party before the World Cup break. And if you're hungry, they're going to have La Taquicardia, Rockies, and Parish Barbecue on the grounds for all of your belly-filling needs.
Wait, did you say Parish Barbecue?
Yes, I did say Parish Barbecue, Phil.
Okay.
I saved the best for last.
That is a good thing to say. Taquicardia is great, too.
They're all great options.
Yeah. You know what else ABW Sprinkle Valley is?
I feel like we're going to get a number of minutes from your house, Phil. What's that number?
It is 9 minutes from my house. It is right off Springdale on 290 way. So you go, you take 290, you turn off on Springdale, kind of over by the Waffle House, and you go up a little ways, and there it is. Got a big yard. If you have kids, there are various kind of playground equipment for the kids to run wild on. Of course, it may be raining, as you said, but like you said, also they're going to be pulling all the stuff indoors. It's a great facility, a great selection of beverages that they do. I will not see you there. I'm going to be in Liberty Hill, actually, hanging out with family for this one, but we'll be obviously doing the usual coverage and the opportunity, of course, to interview Davey Arnaud post-match. Can't pass that up.
He's got a perfect record to keep, and Austin has a responsibility to keep up the St. Louis playing against interim coaches streak. So two different layers of pressure.
And some interesting injury notes in this. Myrto Uzuni is questionable for this one, but also Roman Berkey is questionable for this one. So some wild card elements to this one, right? So again, if Uzuni is questionable, I don't know that they push him necessarily on this one. But again, if you have the prospect of a goalkeeper who is not Roman Berkey, maybe that builds his confidence up. And if he's ready to go again, we can see fully unveiled, crowning himself, Myrto Uzuni continuing his thing. I wouldn't say that this is not an important match. This is the last chance to get 3 valuable points before the break happens and before the club goes into whatever kind of reset it's going to go into. I don't expect that Davey Arnaud is going to be interim coach for half a season, but just depending on how long the search takes. And let's say somebody gobbles up Nancy and Curtin and they really want to fully assess with the sporting director what happens in the coaching search, then maybe we do see a little bit of delay and we see more Arnaud. But to me, going to be really interesting to see, first of all, how fast they move on these new leaders, but also how fast they're going to be able to kind of institute what they want to do. This comes at a time you don't get a 2-month break for a World Cup, obviously, every season. So it is a great opportunity to reset if they seize upon it. I don't think they want to rush upon it, but also it's too good of an opportunity to not maybe salvage the season rather than just decide, okay, we're gonna scrap this and reboot for the sprint season in 27.
A couple things. I'm confident in an Austin win. Not only did they beat this St. Louis team dealing with guys not available for as many minutes as they're available for it coming off of injury, Danny, Owen, Brandon.
Right.
On top of that, St. Louis advanced in the Open Cup, whatever. Literally, both of these teams played each other less than a month ago. That sort of knowing the rhythm of who you're playing and expecting that their lineup is not going to be that different, Berkey excused, that plays into this in a fair amount. And something I wanted to mention, Myrto's crowning himself celebration is because his son's name is Prince. It is a direct reference to his kid. I was mystified that people thought it was weird. And I'm like, it's a wordplay goal celebration.
Right.
That's so wholesome and pure. Not only is it just wholesome and pure on its face, but I love that it's an in reference. I just think it's special.
I mean, there is something Napoleonic about it, which kind of fits with his vibe as well. So on one level, it is a pure tribute to his child, but on the other hand, it is a tribute to a emperor who dared snatch a crown out of the Pope's hand and put it on his own head at a time where that is not fondly looked upon.
You know what? I don't know if I'm going to assume that it's that intellectually deep for him. I don't think it's that.
You don't think he's a scholar of European history, is what you're saying?
I actually think probably a bit more than you might assume, but I don't think he's making exactly the reference you're putting on him, is all I'm saying.
I only care about football and 19th century European intrigue and power battles.
Well, he will dedicate his hat trick to you, Phil, I'm sure.
I'm sure he will. Yeah. Also, interestingly, since that loss that St. Louis suffered to Austin, they are undefeated. But as Justin's going to go into, and that three questions are actually maybe by some standards playing a little bit worse than they did in that game in St. Louis, which is kind of interesting. But obviously, questions with striker, as you can imagine. Obviously, you saw what Simon Bescher did in front of goal in that match. So, and then Cordova, who is their other kind of main striker, is also dealing with some injury right now. So going to be curious to see where the goals come from. Lewin, of course, is rounding back into form from the combination of his wife passing and the injuries that he's been dealing with. So he's going to be a factor. Obviously, you saw what Marcel Hartl did in that game recently. You know that he's going to be a factor as well. So not the easiest team to deal with. And again, we are on 14 dropped points from winning or drawing positions in the 68th minute or later based on what Austin's done in 8 previous contests. So that troubling stat is still floating out there. But again, we talked about when we looked at this group of games being one of the easier ones, if not the easiest in Austin FC's schedule. We were not necessarily frightened of going to St. Louis's weirdly sunken stadium, right, which starts at ground level and then goes deep, deep into the bowels of the earth to the west of the Mississippi River.
Deep into the bowels. What a way to sign off, Phil.
This is the best finger food in the history of the 8 years I've been on this planet.